The Carloop TVR Tuscan Challenge moves to Rockingham, its only visit to the Northamptonshire circuit of the season, and here in front of Rockingham's biggest ever crowd at over 44,000 people. There's going to be plenty of action, that's for sure. Lee Caroline is the man that heads the championship, having had 11 wins, with David Mason second and Phil Keane third. Ben Samuelson's fourth, ahead of Darren Dowling in fifth. So a huge crowd on hand, ready to watch the action. 2 races as ever, and for the first, Lee Caroline's on pole.
We only done 5 laps, so hopefully our tyres will be in good nick for tomorrow, because it's going to be fairly warm, I think. But I think Stockton will be a little surprised, because he's done well to put it on the front row first time out. So I mean, it'd be a bit of a surprise, but I'll be all right. We'll be under control.
The star of qualifying though, Chris Stockton. He's never raced a Tuscan before. He's second.
Very, very good. I thought I'd got it coming up the home straight. My predictive lap time was just showing an edge on what I'd done before, quite a, well, 2 tenths, but it was obviously 2 tenths minus 3 thousandths.
Lining up third on the grid, another front runner. It's David Mason.
Yeah, third will be okay. We're similar to what Lee said, really, trying to conserve the tyres. If it's weather like this tomorrow, then it'll be very hard on them. Just got to try and look after them, keep the pace for both races.
And the first of those races, 8 laps around the Rockingham International Circuit, is about to get underway. The lights go to green. Slow start by Richard Hay. Bad start there by Phil Keane. And he's engulfed by the pack as they make their way down towards turn 1. On board with Phil Keane now as they swing their way through the left-hander. He dives up the inside of Darren Dowling, tries to wriggle his way past, but it's Chris Stockton in the lead. Fantastic. Chris Stockton, who's never raced a Tuscan before, leads as they come into the Dean hairpin. Lee Caroline charging up on the inside of him. There's a contact there. Round goes Darren Dowling. I think it was Tom Ginchard possibly that lent on him. Round has gone Darren Dowling. He's able to rejoin as we look back now from Lee Caroline. Is he leading? That's David Mason going onto the dirt. Mason tucks in behind him. Now, Chris Stockton, I think, is still ahead of them. You're looking back at Mason. Caroline in second place because Chris Stockton, the TVR rookie, is leading as Philip Keane there tries to savage Richard Stanton's car. A replay of the start here. And have a look to see what happens between Tom Ginchard and Darren Dowling. There's a little nudge, I think, and certainly Darren Dowling is the casualty. He spins out, he's able to rejoin though, and you're looking back from Caroline in second place at David Mason. Swinging their way through the Dean hairpin for the second time. Chris Stockton in the lead, trying to get away a little bit now. David Mason having a look up the inside, there's a nudge. Lee Caroline gets all crossed up, but he recovers from it, and David Mason is delayed and falls away. Richard Hay, fourth. In fifth place, Ben Samuelson. A replay here, this was Mason attacking Caroline. Look, he has a look up the inside going into Yentwood, leans on Lee Caroline, turn into the corner, and Mason comes off worse, but he's caught back up again, look. Coming now through the Grattan hairpin, the two of them are nose to tail, accelerating up towards turn 4, onto the banking then. David Mason trying to get the draft off Lee Caroline's car here as they duck down through turn 4, run wide, up against the concrete wall, then over the line, and David Mason has a go on the inside. He's going to go through as they approach the chicane. David Mason takes second, and while they're battling like this, it's playing into the hands of Chris Stockton, who's pulling away up front. Lee Caroline then, the championship leader, 11 times a winner this year, drops to third, and now Richard Hay tries to close as best he can in fourth place. Chris Stockton goes a little bit wide though there at the Dean hairpin. So Stockton, Mason, Caroline, Hay, Ben Samuelson fifth, Richard Stanton sixth, Phil Keane seventh. That's the order at the moment. Pete Osborne loses it, round he goes. Gets the car back in the right direction. Pete Osborne then, after a big spin, rejoining, and Philip Keane now going ahead of Stanton. Stanton gives him a little nudge. Ben Samuelson comes out the inside and gives Richard Stanton a big old whack there. Barges his way past Richard Stanton. That's not the way to treat the customers, and somebody else goes off. That's Jan Persson who's lost it. Wheel spinning, but he's able to rejoin then, hopefully. Waiting for a gap in the traffic. He does so. He rejoins behind Bob Ross there. Now, while all that was going on, the leader, Chris Stockton, has been caught by David Mason. The gap is coming down, and that's Tim Hood with a problem. Tim Hood off the circuit. Now, is that a mechanical problem, or has he been helped there? Let's try and find out. Steam coming off the brakes. Testament to how hard Tim's been trying and how hard he's been driving the car early on in this race. Chris Stockton then, the hero of the hour at the moment, leading with David Mason having a go now to try to get past him. Into the Dean hairpin. Stockton with a very tight line into the corner. David Mason looking there to get the run on him coming out of Dean. They've got Lee Caroline not that far behind them, and then of course Richard Hay catching up as well. David Mason with more Tuscan experience, now monstering the ex-Formula Ford and Legends racer Chris Stockton. Mark Johnston here coming into the Dean Hairpin, another Tuscan rookie. And look at Ben Samuelson's car. It's falling apart now. We saw him give Richard Stanton a whack. Then we saw Tim Hood stationary. I just wonder whether there may have been a Samuelson influence in that. Tim Hood, not a very happy man. Chris Stockton then has now been reeled in by David Mason. The two of them heading down to the Tarzan Hairpin, nose to tail. And Lee Caroline is looking for a way past as well. Possibly at the moment, he's just letting David Mason do the hard work, and Mason drives into the back of Stockton's car there. You see the bodywork concertina up. Chris Stockton able to recover from it, but David Mason now rather frustrated that he hasn't yet found a way into the lead. Chris Stockton still driving very, very well, but he runs wide, and David Mason charges up on the inside of him. Now can Chris Stockton hang on in there? He'll have the inside line for the next corner. Up they come, into the hairpin. Locking up, scrabbling over the curbs. Chris Stockton just back into the lead, and a sideways Mason there. He's now going to be engulfed by Lee Caroline. Caroline up on the inside, and through he goes. Lee Caroline takes second place, being cheered on by the enormous crowd here at Rockingham. Lee Caroline goes up into second place. David Mason slips to third. Over the line they go. Caroline in second, but Mason having a look back on the inside. He can't quite do it. Out of the chicane, accelerating now up towards the Dean Hairpin. Chris Stockton in the lead of the race, and the lap times now are going up, suggesting that the circuit is getting slower. There may actually be some oil down. Let's just have a look as there. Stockton goes wide. Lee Caroline leans on him as they come out of the hairpin. He takes the lead. A sideways Stockton slips to second, and David Mason has a look up on the inside as well. Will he go through? Yes! David Mason goes through. Stockton goes wide over the curve. Having led for so long, Chris Stockton now down to third, but I don't think he's given up yet, and you can see now the way the cars are all starting to slide around. I just wonder whether all that damage from Ben Samuelson's car has contributed to him dropping some liquid on the circuit. There is Ben limping round. He's going to have to pull off, I think, and retire from the race, but it does rather look as though that car is now dripping liquid, possibly oil. Richard Hay up the inside of Chris Stockton, and he hits him! Knocks him round! Richard Hay turns Chris Stockton around, so poor old Stockton, who was leading, is now going to have to rejoin, but way, way down the order. Richard Hay gives him a little nudge, and that's enough to unsettle him, and that's Lee Caroline going off all over the grass. Lee Caroline has made a mistake. Now there must be oil down. Caroline back onto the circuit. Behind, look, you've got Keane and Hay running together. Now where's David Mason in relation to Lee Caroline? He's ahead of him, and Philip Keane slithers out wide on the oil, and Richard Hay goes up on the inside for third. Phil Keane heading for the tarmac, just avoids Tim Hood's car, so Hay goes third. Fourth is Richard Stanton. Fifth is your chauffeur, Phil Keane, after that big, big moment up at the Gretton Hairpin. He comes through now, heading up towards the line. His next target, Richard Stanton, to try to get back ahead of the yellow and black car once again as they come across the line. Down to the first chicane, Phil Keane through on the inside line there. You can see the oil slick that's gone down. Phil Keane demolishing the floppy markers, and now having a go at Richard Hay as well. For the lead, though, it is David Mason just ahead of Lee Caroline. Both cars slither their way into the Dean Hairpin. Right, who's third? Keane third now. Down to fourth is Hay. Down to fifth is Hay. Richard Stanton up on the inside. Stanton gains a place, and David Mason is still leading, but only just. And now Lee Caroline with better traction coming out of Yentwood has a go on the inside for Chapman Curve, and he goes past. Lee Caroline back into the lead. Now, barring another mistake, is he going to be able to hang on in there? David Mason has a look up on the inside. Caroline under real pressure here. The two of them running together as they make their way up now towards Gracelands, and Caroline again, they're getting a little bit twitchy. The oil put down by Ben Samuelson's car still catching them out, and it's a replay of how Lee Caroline lost the lead earlier. Comes along the school straight into the right-hander of Brook, and the car gets away from him, clatters out over the curb and onto the grass. He gets it back onto the tarmac, but only after David Mason has gone through to lead. And behind, Phil Keane goes ahead of Richard Hay, brakes as late as he can, finds the oil and just slides onto the grass. But Lee Caroline now is back in front, and he's back in front when it matters, because this is the last lap of the race. He's going to be a 12th win of the season for him as he comes then now up out of the left-hander of the Gretton Hairpin. He's into turn 4. He's back on the banking. Here he comes then. Another win for Lee Caroline. He's just around the corner. The checker flag at the ready. Lee Caroline wins the sprint race here at Rockingham in the Carloop TVR Tuscan Challenge. Over the line for second place comes David Mason. And Philip Keane is going to come through for third ahead of Richard Stanton, with Chris Stockton recovering to fifth and Richard Hay rounding out the top 6. But Lee Caroline has done it again, and this time a winning margin of 0.8 of a second. So he's a very happy man. So I suspect will Phil Keane be, having got himself back onto the podium, and Chris Stockton showing what might have been, but he really is going to be a force to be reckoned with from now on.
I was struggling away in third for a little while, and then the car come on, and we got back past David and Chris, and then a load of oil went down, so that sort of suited my style of driving to some degree. But then we had a little off, and David got back by, then I got back by. So I mean, it was a good race. It was an exciting race.
I thought Lee and I both congratulated each other at the end of the race. It was excellent racing. TVR and CDL have been a great help this weekend. We had to do an engine change at 2 o'clock this morning because we couldn't repair the other one. So it's turned out well considering.
We're ready for the feature race here of round 9 of the Carloon TVR Tuscan Challenge. Sprint race winner Lee Caroline on pole, David Mason alongside him. Row 2, Phil Keane, Richard Stanton, lights go to green, and a dreadful start by Chris Stockton. The car barely moves. He gets going now, but he's going to be at the very back of the field. He led race 1 for the most part, and now Chris Stockton, in only his second ever Tuscan race, has got a real fight on his hands. Race leaders then dive up towards the Dean hairpin for the first time, and Lee Caroline it is who leads. David Mason runs a little bit wide, and look at the red and white car of Chris Stockton charging its way through from the back. So Caroline ahead of Mason. Mason looking for a gap on the inside that's not really there. Richard Stanton dives up on the inside as well to get past Darren Dowling. Mark Johnson there in number 28, winner of the televised Beer Grand Prix driver competition. He was at Monza racing in the Thoroughbred Grand Prix Car Championship, making his Tuscan debut here this weekend, and he's not doing at all badly. Very little racing experience. There's Ben Samuelson going through in number 58. The car patched up after a rather bruising encounter with Tim Hood in the first race, and Chris Stockton hard at work here, trying to carve his way through the traffic. Goes around the outside of Jan Persson, who's on the outside of Tim Hood, 3 abreast. Jan Persson goes ahead, Chris Stockton goes off, he's on the grass. Oh dear, loses a place to Peter Wheeler, back onto the circuit. It's all liable to be a little bit torrid this race if he's not careful for Chris Stockton, but that's Jan Persson going onto the grass and spinning, round he goes. Spun in the first race, spins in the second as well. Richard Hay in the meantime here, coming under pressure from Darren Dowling. The two of them running nose to tail as they come now through the Gretton hairpin. So Caroline, Mason, Keane, Stanton, Hay and Dowling is the top 6. Just thought for a moment might have been a little bit of smoke there coming from the front of Mason's car, but he's okay as he accelerates up towards turn 4. Lee Caroline leading, but David Mason getting a tow, catching up on him now as they come across the line. Ben Samuelson there running very, very wide as he comes out of turn 4, being chased by Pete Osborne and Wayne Phelan and Rod Barrett as well. The TVR dealer Rod Barrett in the black and yellow car looking for a way through the very quick first chicane. And this is on board with Chris Stockton, who's about to gain a place there around the outside of Rod Barrett. Ahead there you can see Wayne Phelan attacking Pete Osborne. Osborne locks up, goes up the inside of Ben Samuelson, who is hit, and round he goes. And Osborne up onto 2 wheels, and Chris Stockton with nowhere to go is going to be badly delayed by this. He's been forced onto the grass, back onto the circuit, more places lost. 1 step forward and 2 steps back for Chris Stockton. Every time he gets past somebody, circumstances conspire against him, so he's working hard again. Here's the replay. Look, Osborne turns Samuelson around. They're delayed, and off in avoidance goes poor old Chris Stockton. Ben Samuelson not having had a very happy day. The same is true of Pete Osborne, with damage to the front of the car, and Tim Hood's out of the race as well. Tim Hood went really well at Alton Park last time out. He's had a pretty bad time at Rockingham. And the Leicestershire driver then about to trudge away from the car. Now in the meantime, 4 for the lead. Richard Stanton as ever, coming good as the race wears on. Stockton off again, through the gravel. Can he get out the other side? I don't think he can. He spun it, he's in the gravel, and that, I fear, is the end of Chris Stockton's day, and he knows it. Turns the switches off. Chris Stockton then is out of the race. But he certainly proved to the others he is going to be a big, big threat to them in the remaining rounds of the championship. Lee Caroline is the race leader while all the fun and games have been going on behind him. David Mason is still chasing him. They come across the line, past the pits. Caroline leading. 2nd is Mason. 3rd is Philip Keane, yet to win, remember, in a Tuscan. 4th is Richard Stanton. They come through the chicane with Mason not quite so quick as Phil Keane, who urges the car up on the inside there. Philip Keane going for 2nd. Mason braking very, very late for the Dean hairpin. A still yellow flag there as well to warn them of the problems that befell the likes of Hood and Osborne on the previous lap. They come out of the hairpin. These 4 cars still running nose to tail, with Lee Caroline at the moment at the head of the queue. In 2nd place, Mason. 3rd there, the ex-Formula Renault racer Philip Keane, and Richard Stanton riding shotgun in 4th place. Now Keane trying to attack Mason. Mason looking to try to get past Lee Caroline. David Mason with the hardest task really at the moment. He's attacking and defending at the same time. Pete Osborne heading for the pit lane in what's left of his car. So after a pretty good run earlier on, I'm afraid that incident with Ben Samuelson means that Pete Osborne's battered car is going no further in the race. There is Ben Samuelson still going. And the semaphore suggesting that he's not very impressed with life either. So Ben trundling round. Is he going to make it to the finish? Certainly the car at reduced pace. It's not been the same Jolly Ben as we normally see this weekend. He had problems with the setup of the car in the free practice session, having missed testing in the week. David Mason, though, going for the lead. He's on the outside as they come to the Grattan hairpin. It's like a rolling start, look, with them being 2x2 formation there. But as Richard Stanton goes wide, so Phil Keane comes up the inside of Mason. There's no change yet in the order. Mason is behind Caroline, but Philip Keane here becoming ever more of a danger. And Mason hits Caroline and gets sideways. And you can hang on to it. It's a big, big lose, and round it goes. David Mason just gives Lee Caroline a little touch, but it unsettles him more than the race leader. Lee Caroline can count himself very, very lucky he wasn't turned around there, because the speeds were building all the time. But David Mason went for the inside, just clipped Lee Caroline's car, and Caroline, with the save of the day, able to power out of that. He locks up there at the Dean hairpin, and now he's coming under more and more pressure because Philip Keane is going after him now. Up they go into the right-hander of Yentwood. Caroline ahead of Keane, ahead of Richard Stanton. Richard Stanton's car then still in with a chance here of a win. A replay here of what happened to Mason and Caroline. David Mason is quicker up towards turn 4. He goes to the inside though. Lee Caroline takes the line for the corner. They touch. Caroline's car gets all nervous, but David Mason's is the one that is knocked around. He did his best to control a lazy slide, but in the end, to no avail. Here's a replay of it. Looking back from Lee Caroline's car now. Mason just manages to fend off Philip Keane. And Mason right up behind Caroline. Goes for the inside. Lee takes the line for the corner. Mason's nose is there. They touch. Caroline's car gets all unstable, but David Mason goes right the way round, and that spin will drop him down the order. But now Philip Keane is taking up the cudgels, and he's going for the lead, and he might well get the lead as they come through the Dean hairpin. He does. Philip Keane goes ahead of Lee Caroline. A good move there. So Philip Keane is the race leader in second place. Behind him is Lee Caroline, and the two of them now accelerate their way up towards the right-hander of Chapman Curve. In the meantime, though, we have another battle going on here between Rod Barrett and Tom Ginchard. The race leader is Philip Keane, in second is Lee Caroline, and don't rule out Richard Stanton either. Richard Stanton, who won at Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit at the BRDC's 75th anniversary meeting, going well here, and David Mason retaliating, of course, fighting his way back up the field after that spin. He goes ahead of his CDL teammate Tom Ginchard there. The front of David Mason's car looking a little bit second-hand. We've had some wonderful racing from the Carloop TVR Tuscan Challenge this year, and this is no exception. Philip Keane looking for a maiden Tuscan win, leading at the moment. Lee Caroline tucked out behind him. Swinging their way into the right-hander at Brook, riding the curbs, all three of them. Keane, Caroline, and then Richard Stanton in third place. And Lee Caroline desperately determined now to try and get a 13th win of the season. He wants the advantage back from Philip Keane, but Keane would dearly love to have his first Tuscan win in front of a big crowd here. He comes then now up out of the Grattan hairpin, heading up towards the banked left-hander at turn 4 into the pit lane, look to becoming Hugh Marshall, and Lee Caroline now gets the run as they come side by side out of turn 4. Lee Caroline goes through as they come across the line. Lee Caroline is back in front them. Caroline goes through into the turn 1 chicane, very, very fast part of the circuit. They clip the curb, and Keane with the better momentum now has a look on the inside coming into the Dean hairpin. Dive off the banking, swing left, and Keane is back ahead. Wonderful race this. Phil Keane goes ahead once more. Lee Caroline, though, with the car sideways, has not given up yet. There's a bit of bodywork in the road they avoid. Keane locking up under real pressure, coming into Yentwood. He slides wide. Lee Caroline comes back at him, back up the inside. Philip Keane, though, braves it out on the outside line, but to no avail. Caroline takes the lead once again. Philip Keane, very late on the brakes, dives up on the inside, hurls the car up the inside of Lee Caroline, and it works for him. Keane leads once again. That was a good move. Lee Caroline then down to second, Richard Stanton third, and Philip Keane, the race leader, making his way out of Gracelands down towards the Tarzan hairpin. You're looking back at Richard Stanton in third place. In fourth now, by the way, a distant fourth is Richard Hay, but Philip Keane, the race leader, has got Lee Caroline right up behind him. Out of the Tarzan hairpin, the two of them then running together for the lead. Philip Keane doing his level best to defend. He moves across then, blocks Caroline as they come into Brook. Lee tries the outside line, applying intense pressure to Phil Keane. He gets a tighter line coming out of the corner, approaching now the Grattan hairpin. Philip Keane will have the inside line. Lee Caroline's got the outside line. Who gets their nose in front? Will they touch? Lee Caroline tried to take the line for the corner, but Philip Keane on the inside means that there was contact between the two of them. Up they come now then, heading towards the turn 4. Left-hander once again. It is Philip Keane in the lead of the race, but Lee Caroline proved that he was quick here last time, was able to get through, and the car gets all sideways. Lee has to try and steer out of the slide. He corrected, and through they come then. Down to turn 1. Philip Keane leading, Lee Caroline in second place. The crowd getting well into this race. It's been a great battle between them. And up into third now, Richard Hay. Richard Stanton has got a problem. Richard Stanton's car, there it is, crawling into the pit lane. So Richard Stanton, who was lying third, I'm afraid, has developed a problem. He's in the pits. Darren Dowling, in the meantime, is now fourth, and Mark Johnston, in only his second Tuscan race, is in fifth place, going really well. For the lead, though, this the last lap, and they come now into the Tarzan hairpin. Richard Hay catching up to the top two all of a sudden. Phil Keane and Lee Caroline delaying one another with this great battle for honours. Is Phil Keane going to be able to hang on for a maiden TVR Tuscan victory? There's only 2 or 3 more corners to go, and this is the first of them. Turn right through Brook. Lee Caroline still hasn't found a way past Phil Keane. Up they come now to the Grattan hairpin. Keane on the inside, Lee Caroline on the outside line. They turn now into the hairpin. They are nose to tail now. Can Lee Caroline get a run on Phil Keane? He'll be in the slipstream as they make the run up towards the line now. Phil Keane is leading. Lee Caroline, though, is in the draft. He's catching as they come into turn 4. Phil Keane is defending, but Lee Caroline is quicker. They're nose to tail. They're side by side coming up to the line. Lee Caroline does it. Lee Caroline on the line just wins a tremendous race by, get this, 0.102 of a second. Lee Caroline, in front of 44,000 people at Rockingham, wins the feature race in the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. Phil Keane second, Richard Hay third, ahead of Dowling, Mark Johnston and the recovering David Mason in 6th place.
It's so warm out there and you keep missing your braking points, and then when I got in the lead eventually, the worst moment I had was when David tried to come down my inside, caught me in the middle of turn 4, sort of doing 140 mile an hour and just put me full sideways, so that was a bit hairy. And then Philip didn't give me an ounce of breathing space, so it was a fight all the way to the end. And turn 4, the last little manoeuvre there, I lined that up a couple of laps before, and lucky enough it worked, so 13th win, I'm over the moon.
We're getting there, we're knocking on the door now. I mean, today, if I hadn't had the bonnet problem, I think we might have hung on to it, but I mean, the car was brilliant. A lot of thanks to Woody and Tim, have done a great job, but second again, I'm afraid.
It's fabulous to race in front of a big crowd. We had a big crowd at Alton Park. We've had a big crowd 2 or 3 times this year, and there's a huge crowd here at Rockingham. It's great, and it helps everybody. Everybody wants to do that bit better. They've got friends and family here, and there's so many people looking on. No one wants to look a fool, do they? Everyone wants to win.
But Lee Caroline is the man that wins again, and his championship lead increases over David Mason second. Philip Keane third with Ben Samuelson fourth. Darren Dowling is fifth, and Wayne Phelan rounding out the top 6. Thruxton in Hampshire for the 10th round of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. We've had some great racing all season, and here at the fastest circuit that the Tuscans visit all year, you can expect more of the same. The man in charge in the championship is Lee Caroline. He's extended his advantage over David Mason, with Philip Keane third, still looking for his first ever Tuscan win. Ben Samuelson's fourth, ahead of Darren Dowling, and Wayne Phelan sixth in the championship. And there's no surprise as to who's on pole for the sprint race here, Lee Caroline.
I honestly did think if I didn't get pole here, it'd be not so bad, because it's such a fast circuit and the straight's so long round the back that someone's going to get a drag on you the first lap anyway. So, but I'm glad to get it. I mean, we found it hard to find a lap with no traffic, but when I see 16.5 come up on my dash, I thought, right, that'd do. I'll park up regardless.
Alongside him on the front row of the grid, Richard Hay, going well in qualifying. A much better weekend, it seems.
You can't believe the amount these cars move around, and you slide literally all the way around the back at between 140 and 150 miles an hour. It's quite an experience. It's a good ride. You'll enjoy watching some of the onboards.
Third on the grid here, and having only had 2 races in Tuscans, that was at Rockingham, Chris Stockton.
It is awesome. I would think if you're on a passenger ride around here, it would nearly kill you. It would frighten the life out of you.
So just hold on tight to the arms of your chair. The lights are about to go red, engine notes will rise, then the lights will go green, away they go. The sprint race underway, 10 laps around Thruxton, the traditional Duff start from Lee Caroline, and David Mason leads as they go round Allard for the first time, and a spin already. In fact, 2 spinners, and they're the teammates, aren't they? Rod Barrett and Jan Persson have got together already. Up towards the complex then for the first time, Mason leading, Keane second, Chris Stockton third, Richard Hay fourth, and Lee Caroline from pole position down in 5th with Darren Dowling and Ben Samuelson alongside each other. That was for 6th place, and Chris Stockton thumping the curb, looks to go around the outside of Phil Keane. That doesn't work, and wheel lifting the car's power out of Seagrave and on towards Noble for the first time. It's David Mason then in the lead of the race. Phil Keane second, Stockton third, Hay fourth, and we're on board now with Chris Stockton making his way through Goodwood onto Village, then up towards Church for the first time. ultra-fast circuit, Thruxton, and you can see exactly what Richard Hay and Chris Stockton meant about the track in the interviews before the race, and Stockton there tries to find a way past Phil Keane. He can't quite do it, but he's right up behind Keane now as they make the run up towards the chicane. Moving to the inside, Keane defends, and as they come now into the braking area for the first time, it's Mason leading with Caroline, going up on the inside of Richard Hay there for 4th place. Lee Caroline goes through, and this a replay of David Mason's demon start. Lights go to green, Lee Caroline chugs away from the line. Mason nips round him and into the lead, approaching the first corner, and that is easily done for David Mason. Now, though, things are becoming a little bit more frenetic behind him. He's got Phil Keane tucked up behind him, and Keane under pressure from Chris Stockton, who almost touches him there. Right on the limit, making their way out of Goodwood on towards Village. Philip Keane now in 2nd place, right up behind David Mason, right up alongside David Mason, going past David Mason. Keane leads, they touch! Philip Keane just gets away with it. Mason forced wide, and now Chris Stockton goes ahead of him as well, and Lee Caroline moves through on the inside. So David Mason was leading, now he's down to 4th. It's Keane leading Stockton, leading Caroline, but Caroline tries to go around the outside of 1. Can he go around the outside of 2? Not quite. David Mason shoves his nose back up on the inside. Caroline just touches the back of Stockton. Mason over the curb there, look. Fantastic racing. Lee Caroline forced wide. Richard Hay up on the inside now with the dark blue car there. Hay scrabbles past Caroline into 4th place. So the race leader is Keane, 2nd is Stockton, 3rd is Mason, and up towards the complex they go this time with Chris Stockton closing, and now alongside Phil Keane for the lead there. Can he go through? Yes, he can. Chris Stockton, in his 3rd ever Tuscan race, takes the lead away from Philip Keane. The ex-Andy Britnell car then, driven by Chris Stockton, leads, lifts a wheel as it powers then up through Seagrave on towards the left-hander of Noble. Chris Stockton from Formula Ford and Legends Racing ahead of ex-Formula Renault man Phil Keane in 3rd place. David Mason as the cars accelerate around then for the 4th time, and you can see now as we're on board with David Mason exactly how he lost the lead a lap ago. Up on the inside goes Keane, there's a little nudge. Mason forced offline, and suddenly he's in trouble. Past him goes Stockton, and past him goes Caroline. In the meantime, Wayne Phelan comes through ahead of Pete Osborne, then Andy Holden, who made his Tuscan debut at Rockingham. Andy Holden there in the 3rd of the InWeb Insane Racing cars, comes across the line. They're going through number 9, Carl Hansen, the New Zealander. He races a TVR in the New Zealand GT Series. And the reason he's doing this race is because he's in a car run by CDL. He'll drive for CDL in the Bathurst 24 Hours. He's getting used to the team as Lee Caroline gets used to 2nd place. He goes ahead of Phil Keane on the inside. There wasn't very much room, but Lee Caroline takes full advantage of the limited gap, moves ahead of Phil Keane, and now we'll try to bring the gap down to Chris Stockton. Stockton the leader, 2nd is Caroline, 3rd is sideways Keane, 4th is Mason, and the battle here between Andy Holden and Pete Osborne continues. They both got themselves ahead this time of Wayne Phelan. Phelan fighting back, Carl Hansen running with them as the cars now make the run once more up towards the chicane. Carl Hansen then sees the InWeb cars ahead, shuffling the order around with Pete Osborne. And now Chris Stockton is being reeled in by Lee Caroline as they make the run out of the chicane up across the line. Past the pits goes Chris Stockton. Lee Caroline, once again, good news for us, making a bad start. And now Stockton running wide at the first corner. Stockton misses the apex at Allard, and through easily goes Lee Caroline. Lee Caroline takes over the lead as they go into the complex then. Stockton slips to 2nd. In 3rd place is Keane. In 4th place is David Mason. And that, I suspect, is it as far as now Lee Caroline and the lead is concerned. He's going to pull away, surely, from Chris Stockton. Making their way up then now, heading towards the left-hander of Noble, Lee Caroline, who, as tradition dictates, did fewer laps than most in qualifying. Therefore, his tyres are in better order. He's leading from Chris Stockton, but Stockton is under pressure from Keane. And Lee Caroline is being caught again by Chris Stockton here. He's not going to get away. Stockton is right up behind Lee Caroline. He's going to have a look alongside Lee Caroline as they make the run up now through Village on towards Church. Can Chris Stockton get the lead back? I reckon he can on the inside here, coming into the right-hander. Chris Stockton goes through on the inside. What a move. Chris Stockton takes the lead back. So Lee Caroline slips to 2nd once again. They're going to come through in a moment to start the last lap of the race, but Phil Keane is attacking Caroline as well now. Up to the chicane. Which way does Stockton defend? Phil Keane right alongside. Stockton gets all sideways into the chicane. Stockton hits the curb. Keane across the curb. Stockton across the curb. They touch as well as they come out of the corner. They lean on each other and now make the run up across the line. Stockton ahead. He's got both Caroline and Keane behind him and attacking, and despite the best efforts of all of them, they still can't unsettle Chris Stockton. heading now up towards the complex. Is this going to be a race win for Stockton, or is Caroline or Keane or Mason going to get ahead of him? This has been a tremendous race, and Chris Stockton now is just ahead as they make the run through the complex. Chris Stockton leads by a length. In second place is Lee Caroline. In third is Keane. Fourth is Mason. And David Mason attacking now as the air gets under the bonnet, threatens to rip the bodywork off the front of the car. Chris Stockton has done everything right. He's led, he's built up a lead. He's had that eroded by Caroline. He's lost the lead, he's fought back. And Chris Stockton is still leading then as the cars make the run up towards Church for the last time. The cars all now as the tyres wear through the race, getting a little bit loose at the back, and the car's becoming a real handful. David Mason swings right. They've got the run now, out of Church, up through Brooklands, heading towards the chicane. And now, this is it as far as Stockton and Caroline are concerned. They've got the run to the chicane, and this will decide the race as Lee Caroline comes powering up on the outside. He takes the lead. Lee Caroline leads coming into the chicane, but Chris Stockton tries to go around him on the outside line there. They're almost alongside each other, but it's not to be for Stockton. Lee Caroline's got the line through the chicane. He's going to win for the 14th time in the Carloom TVR Tuscan Challenge. There's the checkered flag. Lee Caroline wins a tremendous race. Chris Stockton takes second, third Keane, fourth Mason, fifth Hay as they come across the line. And rather overshadowed by that 5-car battle for the lead, Ben Samuelson sixth, ahead of Tim Hood, Darren Dowling, Andy Holden and Pete Osborne in 10th place. We're back at Thruxton for the feature race at the Carloom TVR Tuscan Challenge. This runs over 12 laps, the grid based on the results of yesterday's race. And that means that on pole position is Lee Caroline with Chris Stockton alongside him. The second row, Philip Keane and David Mason. The third row, Richard Hay and Ben Samuelson. The grid is complete. Richard Stanton joining this race at the back of the field. He'll be a man to watch as well. He missed yesterday's race. The lights then are about to go from red to green. Let's see then who's going to make the best start. Lights are red, engine notes rise. Bit of creeping from Lee Caroline. Lights go to green now, and away they go. Richard Stanton on the move from the back of the grid. Who's going to lead at the first corner? It's just going to be Lee Caroline then, with Chris Stockton alongside him on the outside, heading up towards the complex. Caroline leads, second is Stockton, third Mason. Bit of leaning there. Carl Hansen gets tipped sideways onto the grass, back onto the circuit, demolishes one of the corner markers there, and I think it may have been Hugh Marshall, his CDL teammate, that hit him. And Carl Hansen still sorting out a big slide as he arrives at the complex. The Kiwi having a baptism of fire then. First race ever in a Tuscan and at Thruxton as Chris Stockton goes up the inside of Lee Caroline, takes the lead at Church. Through he goes, but Stockton runs wide. Lee Caroline comes back at him on the inside. They're side by side there, the pair of them, making the run up towards the chicane for the first time. Now you're on board with David Mason. Mason in third, in second, up on the inside. No, back to third again as Chris Stockton goes around the outside of him and tries to get alongside Lee Caroline. And Caroline leads at the end of lap one. Stockton second, then third is David Mason. Fourth is Philip Keane as they make the run up across the line. Already this leading quartet getting away from the Richard Hay, Ben Samuelson battle for fifth, and this is a replay of Carl Hansen being tapped into a little slide. Wait for it. Bang! Round he goes, all over the grass, hits the polystyrene, and Carl Hansen miraculously kicks it away from anything solid, throws it sideways into the complex, gets his heart rate back to normal and carries on. Race leaders there, headed by Lee Caroline, then the battle behind is Stockton, Mason and Keane, and Chris Stockton's car getting a bit loose there. You see the back of it trying to come round on him. Lee Caroline is the race leader. Well, normally when Caroline gets ahead, he pulls away. It's happening now a little bit as Chris Stockton goes very wide. He allows David Mason now up on the inside. The one-time MGF racer Mason goes through ahead of ex-Legends racer Chris Stockton. So Mason goes second, Stockton down to third, and in fourth place Philip Keane heading up then towards the chicane once more. Stockton ideally placed to fight back. He's getting a toe off Mason. He has a look on the inside. Is this going to be it? No, David Mason's wise to this. He moves across, covers the line. In front of the grandstands, they thump the curb. Right, left, right again. Out of the chicane, up now, over the start and finish line. And the race leader, Lee Caroline, is getting away. There's Richard Stanton on the move. He's already broken into the top 10, and Stanton from flat last on the grid doing a great job here. Richard Hay having a fairly miserable time. He's dropped away behind Tim Hood and Dowling and Samuelson. And Richard Hay, bearing in mind that he was on the front row of the grid for the sprint race, has had another fairly miserable time here. He's dropped down and down the order, and now certainly is out of the hunt as far as a good result here is concerned. Four of them vying for the lead. Caroline with Mason catching him again, I reckon. In third place is Stockton, and fourth is Philip Keane here. Lee Caroline getting away. He was earlier, being caught now, but is he going to be able to respond? If that battle rages on behind, he's going to get away, but Mason and Stockton are together, and Stockton now pulls out of the draft, gets alongside Mason's car. They make the run up Woodham Hill, heading towards the chicane. David Mason just getting his nose in front. They almost rub one another there into the braking area. Chris Stockton back on the inside, should go through. Yes, he does. Chris Stockton is second once again, and Lee Caroline is not escaping here. Over the line. Through they go. They order Caroline, Stockton, Mason, and then Philip Keane, and he's somebody else that you shouldn't rule out here. Keane's still very determined to have a first Tuscan win. He's done the whole season. He made his Tuscan debut here last year, so he should go well around Thruxton in one of these cars. In the meantime, Mason running a bit wide at the complex, loses a length to Stockton, and Chris Stockton now hunting down Lee Caroline for the lead. Through Campbell, Cobb and Seagrave they go at the complex. Now up towards the left-hander at Noble. You're on board with Chris Stockton. Ahead is a rather loose-looking Lee Caroline, who gets it a little bit crossed up and then gives Stockton a chance on the inside. Chris Stockton tries to go for it. The door is closed, and now as they make the run up through Goodwood on towards Village, the race leader is Lee Caroline, but Chris Stockton is now giving him a really hard time in second place here. The two of them nose to tail, and Stockton now is ideally placed to challenge as they come up the hill, and he goes to the inside then. Is that going to get him alongside? He's going to have to be brave here. Lee Caroline might just have enough grunt in a straight line to hang on to the advantage. He does, but Stockton is going to come through nonetheless on the inside, then throws the car up the inside. Through he goes. Chris Stockton with a very brave move takes over the lead. That delays Lee Caroline sufficiently to give David Mason a chance to latch onto the tail as well. Over the line they go. The new order, Stockton, Caroline, Mason, and Philip Keane here, just possibly waiting for it to end in tears ahead of him. He's not falling away too much here from David Mason, but at the moment he's not really able to threaten them either. Into the complex they come. So Stockton ahead of Caroline and then Mason. Keane sideways as he tries to join in again, but these three cars now absolutely nose to tail. The impecunious David Mason right up behind Lee Caroline now. Chris Stockton, only his fourth ever Tuscan race, remember. He leads Lee Caroline. In third place is David Mason. In fourth place, Philip Keane. It took Lee Caroline until his second season to have a TVR win. It took David Mason until his second season to have a TVR win. And now, the man in charge, Chris Stockton, well, his first season, his fourth race, he's led all of them. He makes his way then now on through Church, out of the right-hander, back on the power. You're looking from David Mason's car at the back of Lee Caroline. Caroline running wide up onto the curb. Now the car's head up Woodham Hill towards the chicane. Is this Mason's chance to have a go for the lead? No. For second, he might be able to have a look, though. He's not going to be able to outbrake two cars. Can he outbrake one? No, he can't. Lee Caroline has the line for the corner. He's still then stuck behind Caroline in third place. David Mason makes the run out of the chicane, up across the start and finish line. And all the while, Mason's got to keep an eye to his mirrors, of course, because Philip Keane is right up there behind him as well. Caroline a little bit sideways round Allard. Now Mason looks to get the run on him as they head up towards the complex once again. Into the braking area they go. Philip Keane kicking up the dirt there. Chris Stockton locks up, slides into the complex. He's not getting away though here, despite the best efforts of David Mason to delay Lee Caroline and battle with him for second place. It's not really helping Chris Stockton in the lead. Philip Keane still in fourth place here, just looking for a gap to get past David Mason. Mason stuck behind Caroline. But Chris Stockton, we've said it before, in the context of the Rockingham races and the sprint race here, very impressive newcomer is there. Keane throws the car up the inside of Mason. Mason sideways as he retaliates, and sideways again. David Mason giving his tyres a lot of stick, but great car control. Mason, like Lee Caroline, somebody with an oval racing background where you've got to have good car control, and it shows perhaps more in these cars than any other, but through on the inside goes Philip Keane. Phil Keane, from a very precise single-seater background in Formula Renault racing, he's being caught again by Mason, who's getting a tow as they head up the hill. The leaders are pairing off, the third place duel pairing off this time as Mason tries to go around the outside of Keane, and they touch, then coming into the chicane and they touch again. Mason bouncing his way over the curb. Phil Keane hangs on to third place. David Mason still then in fourth as they come across the line. This is another excellent race. People have complained a little bit about the entry sizes in TVR Tuscan racing this year. Well, if the racing's as good as this, it doesn't really matter. We haven't had a bad race all year, I don't think, in the TVR Tuscan Challenge. And here is another tremendous race as Richard Hay heads for the pit lane. Sees the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, stands on the brakes. Meantime, David Mason and Philip Keane are still locked together for third place. Keane on the inside at Noble. Round the outside, tries to go David Mason. That'll give him the inside line for Goodwood, but he can't go through there. David Mason then tries to battle his way past Philip Keane, but to no avail. Here are the leaders. Stockton versus Caroline. For third, it is Keane versus Mason. Accelerating now on towards Church. You're on board again with David Mason as they turn right, touch the curb, then on the inside at Church. And now, because the cars have already had a free practice, a qualifying session and one race, these tyres are starting to get a little bit past their best. All the cars sliding around a little bit more now. Philip Keane brakes late, coming down to the chicane. David Mason right up behind him. Where's the gap? No gap. Phil Keane hangs on to his third place with Mason almost pushing him through the chicane. Stockton leading. Second is Lee Caroline. And here for third and fourth over the line, David Mason again having a look on the inside to get past Philip Keane. Still can't find a way by. Behind them, by the way, Richard Stanton is still making excellent progress up through the field. Before long, I reckon he is going to break into the top six. Now you can see them. Mason again behind Keane, who runs a little bit wide, going into Campbell. That's the right-hander, then left through Cobb, then right again through Seagrave. Mason gets a tighter line, coming into the corner, makes the run now alongside Philip Keane, but he's going to be on the wrong line for the next corner of Noble. Philip Keane can stay on the inside and should take third place back again. He does. They're still side by side. David Mason's got the inside line for the next corner. Now he goes through. Now David Mason asserts himself and takes third place away. In the meantime, Chris Stockton is still ahead of Lee Caroline. Is Caroline playing with him, or can he genuinely not catch up? Remember, we saw this in the sprint race. Here's a replay, though. Oh, David Mason going around the outside of Philip Keane. They touch at the chicane. They touch again and again as Mason tries to drive himself onto a line. Instead, he drives himself onto the curb. The car fishtails back onto the road, and Chris Stockton is still ahead of Lee Caroline. Now, can Caroline genuinely not get past, or is he just sitting there behind Chris Stockton and content to make his move on the last lap? Stockton a little bit ragged out of Church that time as the car bounces wide. Lee Caroline makes the run up alongside him now as they head up Woodham Hill towards the chicane. Lee Caroline powers past. Chris Stockton sits behind him, coming into the braking area. Is there a gap? No, there isn't. Lee Caroline's wise to all of this. Through the chicane they come then, turn right, left over the curve, right again. Chris Stockton coming through now to start the last lap in second place behind Lee Caroline. Has Caroline now done enough to keep Stockton at bay? Third is Mason. Fourth is Philip Keane as they come across the line. In fifth place is Richard Stanton, ahead now of Ben Samuelson. And the race leaders make the run up towards the complex for the last time. Big crowd here at Thruxton this weekend to watch some very exciting racing. Lee Caroline clipping the curb then as he turns into Campbell. Now left through Cobb, right into Seagrave. Lee Caroline's car sliding around ever more. You can see there in second place Chris Stockton. And Stockton has not given up yet. Now, can Caroline get away on this last lap? I don't think he can. Chris Stockton is keeping him honest. He has a look on the inside going into Noble here for the lead. They're side by side. Caroline slides. Stockton goes past him. Chris Stockton takes the lead on the last lap of the race. Now, Lee Caroline possibly is going to be okay to get the lead back. But he's still got half a lap to run, including the real slipstreaming part of the circuit up the hill towards the chicane. It's Stockton in the lead then. Lee Caroline is in second place. David Mason hanging on to third. Chris Stockton, the race leader, up towards the chicane for the last time. Now this is where Lee Caroline gets into the slipstream and normally can pull out, but there's a yellow flag waving there. We've got a slow car at the chicane. The leaders are side by side. Caroline goes ahead on the outside line, but it's the wrong place to be. Into the chicane, Stockton locks up. Stockton leads them. Out of the chicane, then nose to tail. Lee Caroline clambering up on the curb, looking for a gap. He gets sideways, but he's not going to win. Chris Stockton wins. Fantastic race. Chris Stockton wins in only his fourth ever Tuscan race. Second is Caroline, third is Mason, fourth is Keane, and this is Wayne Phelan and Andy Holden coming into the chicane together. This is for 10th place, and Wayne Phelan is just ahead of Holden with Jan Persson tucked up behind them. Rod Barrett comes through now there to finish in 9th, and a good battle between Phelan and Holden. So confirmation of the top 10. Stockton, Caroline, Mason, Keane. You saw all of that. Behind them, Richard Stanton came from last on the grid to 5th, with Ben Samuelson in 6th.
It's just been the most exciting weekend I've ever had. I mean, to drive around here, firstly, it's an amazing circuit. It's just so fast. I was just saying to David, it is just so fast. You're permanently seeing grass and trees because you're always on the turn. You seem to wrench your neck round to actually see where you're apexing.
Well, as you see on the video, I had a fair lead, probably 2-3 seconds, and then the car just totally cut out on the start-finish straight, totally died, and I was madly flicking on and off the ignition switch, and it just come back. So, I mean, I lost my lead there, but I mean, he drove a good race. So, I mean, there's nothing you can take away from him. He's come here and he's won. So.
This then is how the championship looks after 10 rounds. Lee Caroline still pulling away from David Mason with Philip Keane third. Samuelson fourth ahead of Dowling fifth, and Wayne Phelan rounding out the top 6. It's Castle Combe, it's the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge, it's round 11 and Lee Caroline remains the man to beat in the series. He's had to work pretty hard for his victories this season. Amongst the opposition, David Mason and Philip Keane, they are second and third, with Ben Samuelson fourth, Darren Dowling lying fifth at the moment, and Wayne Phelan rounding out the top six. And as they line up on the grid for the sprint race, it's Lee Caroline on pole position. Caroline racing car then on pole, and Richard Hay with the Works TVR engineering car lining up alongside. Richard Hay has been very good in qualifying this year, not so good in the races. Let's see whether he can go one pace better than his qualifying position. And that is Ben Samuelson lining up third on the grid. So everybody ready for action then. Tuscans lined up on the grid, ready for the 10-lap sprint race. The lights go to green, away they go. Good start being made by David Mason from fourth on the grid. We're on board with Richard Stanton, bit of nudging between Phil Keane and Lee Caroline. And Richard Stanton, the Salisbury driver, dropping down to what, about fifth or sixth place here. The cars power up towards Quarry Corner for the first time, with David Mason just ahead, but a great start by Ben Samuelson, puts Ben on the inside, going into Quarry. Ben leads. Through on the inside goes Ben Samuelson. So TVR's PR man is up front at the moment with Lee Caroline looking for a way past David Mason, and through he goes. Samuelson, then Caroline, then Mason, then Hay, then Keane, then Stanton as they come into the S's for the first time. Through Old Paddock now, swing right on the power, down towards Hammerdown. Rest of the field filing through, including their number 3, Hugh Marshall, in the second of the CDL cars. But it is Ben Samuelson leading, whilst Lee Caroline looks for a way past and also looks to try to defend second place from David Mason, who is right up behind him. The three of them, nose to tail, into bobbies, right, left, right again. Then they accelerate up towards the end of the lap, down towards Camp Corner. In fourth place, Richard Hay, and fifth there behind him is Phil Keane. Down they come then. Lee Caroline having a look on the outside line to try and go all the way around Ben Samuelson. He can't do it, and that's number 10, Tim Hood then, setting about Richard Stanton as they come across the line. Lee Caroline having a look on the inside. Is he going to go through it? Foley, yes he is, up on the inside. Caroline goes ahead now. Lee Caroline leads, and David Mason joining in as well. He's going to get ahead of Ben Samuelson. He's got the right line for Quarry, and through he goes. Caroline, Mason, Samuelson, then Hay and Keane, still nose to tail for fourth and fifth places here. Up they come towards Old Paddock once again. The three leaders running together, and Ben Samuelson being caught by Richard Hay. Lee Caroline leading. He's not yet getting away though. David Mason still tucked up behind him. Heading through Hammerdown once more towards Tower Corner. Richard Hay looking for a way past Samuelson. Hay also defending from Keane, and David Mason looking for a gap as that's Keane throwing the car up the inside of Richard Hay and somehow managing to hang on to it and take fourth place. A great move. Phil Keane comes through, up into fourth place then now. Richard Hay gets out of the way, gets out of trouble, manages to stay in the race, but Phil Keane there with a very brave effort up the inside, and now Mason is attacking for the lead, and is he going to go through? Yes, he is on the inside there. David Mason wriggles past, Mason leads, Caroline second, Samuelson third, fourth is Keane, fifth is Hay, and you're on board now with Richard Stanton down in seventh place. Accelerating towards Quarry, still Mason heads Caroline. And whilst they're battling like this, Ben Samuelson is able to have a go back at Lee Caroline. Philip Keane catching up to them as well now. Keane fourth. David Mason looking to break clear. Ben Samuelson diving up on the inside, and through he goes. An excellent move. Ben Samuelson takes second place in the purple car ahead of Lee Caroline. Caroline, the dominant man in the championship this year, now down to third place. Keane fourth, Hay fifth as they come towards Tower once again. Ben Samuelson brakes very late, throws the car into the corner, runs wide, scrubs off the speed. Caroline up on the inside, goes second. Phil Keane for third, no, not quite. Ben Samuelson just able to defend, but a mistake made then by Ben Samuelson. That drops him down to third place now. Down they come towards Camp Corner. Samuelson getting all sideways and waving vigorously at Phil Keane behind. Possibly Phil giving him a bit of a nudge then, and Ben wasn't very grateful about it. Out of Camp Corner they come, nose to tail for third, and Ben Samuelson in the world's widest Tuscan, fending off Phil Keane, who goes one side and then the other. The leaders look at getting away as Samuelson sorts himself out here. Phil Keane having a look alongside, heading up towards Quarry. Who's going to take third as they come into the braking area? Keane tries to chop across. Ben Samuelson stands his ground. They lean on each other. They push one another around the corner. And Ben Samuelson goes back ahead. And now Richard Hay up alongside the pair of them. Hay for third. Is he going to be able to go through? Yes, he is. Richard Hay third. Fourth is Samuelson. Fifth is now Keane. And Richard Stanton is sixth. And you're on board with him. What a race. This has been one of the most fiercely contested TVR Tuscan Challenge seasons of all. The category started in 1989, and now Keane dives up the inside of Samuelson. Dowling looking for a way past Stanton. Now the top two getting away whilst everybody else queues up for third place. It's Richard Hay at the moment, just ahead of Keane, ahead of Samuelson, ahead of Stanton. People have complained about the size of the entry this year. Well, they can't complain about the racing. It has been exceptional all season. And Stanton now looking for a way past Ben Samuelson, who, remember, led early on. And now Ben being shoveled down the order a little bit. Richard Stanton across the start and finish line. Turns right through Folly, climbs up now towards Quarry Corner. Fabulous circuit, Castle Combe, and TVR Tuscans always produce great racing round here. For third place, Richard Hay, looking to fend off Phil Keane as they run nose to tail through the right-hander. David Mason still leading, but only just. He's got Lee Caroline all over the back of him now. Remember that these race results will determine the grid for race 2 for the feature race. Hay third, ahead of Keane, ahead of Samuelson, then Stanton. And now Lee Caroline through Hammerdown making his bid. He's on the inside for Tower Corner. There's a gap on the inside. Can he go through? Yes, he can. Lee Caroline goes back in front. David Mason slots in behind him. Caroline sits in the middle of the road. Mason can't find a gap now in which to attack as they dive into Bobby's once again. A wheel on the dirt. Mason a little bit ragged that time. And now as they come down towards Camp Corner, Lee Caroline is getting away. Caroline suddenly able to stretch his legs, and Lee Caroline is leading as he comes now down towards Camp Corner. Mason on the limit, the car quivering. In third place, Richard Hay, and we're on board now with Mark Johnston. He debuted in the TVR Tuscan Challenge at Rockingham. He's the winner of a televised Beer Grand Prix driver competition. He'd already had an outing in the Thoroughbred Grand Prix Car Championship. And Mark Johnston now in another of the insane racing cars, looking for a way past Pete Osborne, who in turn is tucked up behind the TVR chairman, Peter Wheeler. Turning right through Folly, up now towards Quarry Corner they go. Hard on the brakes, swing right. Huge numbers of spectators watching all of this at Quarry as ever. Castle Combe attracting a bumper crowd for its bank holiday meeting, and they're being treated to some great racing, and they're about to see, I suspect, Lee Caroline take yet another win. Somebody off though there, somebody off! That looks like Richard Stanton possibly, who's gone hard into the barriers, and another car involved as well. Now let's try and work out who it is. Out of Bobby's comes Richard Hay, Philip Keane behind him, and then a gap, and that's where Samuelson and Stanton would have been. That's Richard's view, and that is Ben Samuelson clambering out of the car. Richard Stanton walks over to Ben Samuelson, who walks past him, and Ben Samuelson's car well and truly embedded in the tyres, and Richard Stanton having gone off at high speed as well with front and rear damage. It's not often that we've had big accidents this year in the championship. Now let's try and piece together who did what, to which and to whom. You're on board with Richard Stanton coming out of Earl Paddock. Ben Samuelson's ahead of him. Heading through Hammerdown towards Tower Corner, on board with Stanton. There's a gap on the inside, Richard goes for it, brakes very late, the car slides, and then bang, he hits Ben Samuelson as off the pair of them go. It's tempting to say that might have been Richard's zealotry that was partly to blame for all of that, but it was a very fierce scrap that almost inevitably was going to end in tears. But the sad thing is they're both in the tyres. Lee Caroline is in the chicane at Bobby's for the last time. He's got behind him there, David Mason. Mason shadowing him down to the checkered flag, but it's going to be another win for Lee Caroline unless he makes a mistake at the last corner, and he's not going to do so. He turns right, the checkered flag at the ready. The champion-elect now, Lee Caroline, comes across the line. There is the checkered flag. Mason is second. Third is Richard Hay. For fourth place, Philip Keane. Tim Hood is going to take fifth. And this man, Darren Dowling, who's had an abnormally quiet race by his standards, rounds out the top six. And what about Mark Johnston? Ninth. Looks as though that's going to be his reward. He's got Wayne Phelan ahead of him, though. Is he close enough with a corner to spare to find a way past him? Rod Barrett here coming across the line any moment for seventh. And Mark Johnston being attacked by Pete Osborne. So Barrett seventh, Phelan eighth. Johnston 9th, Osborne 10th. Great four-way battle right the way to the checkered flag, and some great racing here at Castle Combe. Lee Caroline then takes the race win.
I thought I had it sussed after Thruxton because I was in the lead by the first corner. I thought I had it sussed, but it's the dirty side of the track here, so I'm going to blame that today. But I mean, we crossed the line first, is what matters. So it was a hard race, so David didn't give me any breathing space. So. It was pretty airy stuff.
It was a good battle. Lee drove a really good race. Hopefully, if the gearbox doesn't do the same problem again in the second race, maybe we'll get me a bit more of a lead, and perhaps he might not catch me next time.
The car was as quick as these two. They got away a bit, and then when I caught them up. But to be honest, I hadn't really got a great deal more. I could stay with them, but once I got to that stage, I kind of used the tyres, so that was it, really.
We're ready for the feature race here of round 11 of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. The grid formed by the results of the earlier race, which means Lee Caroline's on pole with David Mason alongside, and as the lights go green, there's one car very slow away. We're on board with Darren Dowling then as they make the run towards Folly for the first time. Again, Lee Caroline not exactly being like a rocket ship off the start, and so it's David Mason who leads as Darren Dowling fights his way up behind Richard Hay towards Quarry Corner. It's Mason leading. In second place is Hay with Keane alongside Dowling. Fourth, fifth is Lee Caroline. And the car's now making the run towards El Paddock for the first time, but first they have to go right and left and right through the S's. If you saw race 1 before the break, you'll remember that there was a big accident between Richard Stanton and Ben Samuelson. Well, sadly, Ben's car has pulled off on the warming up lap, and Richard Stanton's car never got that far with the damage. And there, the left-hand side door opening on Pete Osborne's car as Darren Dowling suddenly arrives round the outside of Richard Hay for second place. Can he do it? Right round the outside he goes. Yes, he can do it. A great move by Darren Dowling. Richard Hay looking for a way back up on the inside, but he can't do it. So, Mason is the leader. In second place is Darren Dowling, and Richard Hay third. Fourth is Phil Keane. Fifth is Lee Caroline. And then sixth is Tim Hood as they come down towards Camp Corner for the first time. Another very lively TVR Tuscan Challenge race here. The leaders come across the line. It's the former Superstocks ace, David Mason, in the lead. And Philip Keane, who came so close to winning a Tuscan race at Rockingham, looking for a way now to get himself ahead of Richard Hay, who won at Snetterton. Keane up on the inside, heading towards Quarry, but he can't get past Hay yet, and he's also trying to defend from Lee Caroline. Caroline looking on the outside, then swinging across possibly to the inside on the run up towards the S's this time around. Behind them is Tim Hood going well in this feature race, and there Caroline looking for a way past Keane. No, he can't do it. Phil Keane stands his ground. He's not to be intimidated by Lee Caroline, the most successful man in terms of race wins in this year's championship. So the race leader is David Mason, but coming under pressure as now Caroline and Keane are together, and Caroline goes through on the inside. Darren Dowling going better than ever before, looking for a way past Mason for the lead of the race here. On board with Keane, into Bobby's right, left, right again. This takes him along Dean Straight, down through Westway towards Camp Corner with David Mason leading, but now they're bunching up behind. Darren Dowling is stuck there, unable to find a gap and get past him, and they're all queuing up there on the tail of him. The rest of the field diving into Camp Corner. Wayne Phelan there running side by side with the air-conditioned car of Pete Osborne. Still the door flaps open. Vincent Vellatini behind in the red car, run by the race sport team that we saw out for the first time at Alton Park. And Vellatini returning to the series as up front the order remains Mason ahead of Dowling, but then Hay with Lee Caroline up behind him, and that's the Kiwi Carl Hansen losing it. Carl Hansen, who races in the New Zealand GT Championship in a TVR, and hopefully he's going to be driving for CDL in the Bathurst 24 Hours. Made his Tuscan debut at Thruxton, racing here for the first time. He's going to be racing at Spa next week, and on board with Philip Keane you can see Lee Caroline go up the inside of Richard Hay. Hay doesn't defend too vigorously there. He knows that Lee Caroline is on a mission, and through he comes. Now there's an awful lot of gunge being splattered onto the camera there of Phil Keane, and presumably onto his visor and windscreen as well. I'm just trying to work out where it's all coming from. Down towards Camp Corner, Lee Caroline having a go and very easily gets up the inside of Darren Dowling, but look at the way now that David Mason has built up the lead. Over the line they come. Now, is Lee Caroline's car spitting out a bit of liquid? That possibly was why Phil Keane's camera lens was all grubby. Let's just see. Up towards Quarry Corner goes this battle for second place here between Caroline and Dowling. For fourth place, Richard Hay and Phil Keane are side by side. Richard on the inside, on the outside line is Phil Keane. And the two of them now accelerate their way up towards El Paddock once again. Wheel lifting. Richard Hay still in fourth place. Phil Keane fifth and Tim Hood in sixth. He's riding with them, but he's not quite able to have a go at this little battle that's raging on ahead of him. Lee Caroline now breaking away from Darren Dowling, and Dowling under pressure from Richard Hay, who sees a gap on the inside, but he's not quite close enough to level there with Darren Dowling. Can he stay alongside as they come towards Bobby's? That's the curb-hopping Pete Osborne, and Vincent Vellatini getting it a little bit crossed up in the background. He sorts himself out, but he's about to lose a place to Andy Holden, who goes around the outside of him. The ex-Caterham racer snatches a place away, and Hugh Marshall is next in the queue. Down towards Tower, Marshall in the yellow fronted car looking for a way past Vincent Vellatini, but he can't do it yet. Vellatini, who's been racing this year in the BRDC single-seater championship, trying something very different now. We're back on board with Keane alongside Richard Hay, heading up now towards Quarry. Phil Keane diving up the inside of Darren Dowling as well. He's got past Hay. Can he get past Dowling? Yes, he can. Darren Dowling being hung out to dry on the outside there. Bit of opposite lot needed. Darren hangs on to it, but he's down to 4th place. So it is David Mason ahead at the moment. In 2nd place, Lee Caroline. 3rd now, Philip Keane making progress. 4th, Darren Dowling. 5th is Richard Hay. And 6th, a little bit closer, I fancy this time, is Tim Hood. So the race leaders then again make the run towards Tower. Hay looking for a way past Dowling, but Phil Keane is a man on a mission now to try to catch up with Lee Caroline, and Caroline looking to catch up onto the back of Mason's car. It's all happening. You saw Ben Samuelson's car there just parked by the side of the road. Sadly, that having expired on the warming up lap. So down towards camp, Richard Hay, the next man to watch. Can he find a way past Darren Dowling? He's lining himself up, look for a go on the inside, coming into camp corner. He should be able to go through. Yes, he can. Richard Hay goes 4th then on the inside line, coming out of camp corner. Slipping behind him to 5th, Darren Dowling. It was a great opening lap by Darren. Now, though, the InWeb Insane Racing car is falling down the order again. This is Pete Osborne on the inside of the TVR chairman, Peter Wheeler. Osborne goes through. Pete Osborne dives up on the inside, takes the place away. Now, meantime, Darren Dowling coming under increasing pressure from Tim Hood. These two are nose to tail, down towards Bobby's once again. And just look at the gap between Mason and Caroline. It is coming down, but is it coming down quickly enough? Lee Caroline going after David Mason, no argument there. But is he going to run out of laps in which to find a way through? It's only a 15-lap race, this. And that around Castle Combe, which is just over a mile and a bit, doesn't take that long. Just like Thruxton, a very fast circuit, Castle Combe, and it's one that favours the brave. David Mason and Lee Caroline, both from an oval racing background, up front at the moment. Phil Keane then in 3rd place. Richard Hay, who of course drove for the TVR team at Le Mans this year, is in 4th. In 5th place, you've got Darren Dowling. 6th, Tim Hood, and Lee Caroline, who is set to drive on the subject of the Le Mans-based TVRs. One of those cars in the Spa 1,000 kilometres in a week's time is chasing after David Mason. Lee Caroline in his 2nd year, like Mason of Tuscan Racing, very impressive he has been this year. And Lee Caroline going after Mason. But David, who has had all sorts of rotten luck, he's done the whole season on whatever is less than a shoestring budget, has driven extremely well and is certainly deserving of another win. He may be able to hang on to this one and take another victory. Down towards Camp Corner they come. Heading now down towards the right-hander of Camp Corner. Phil Keane turns his way into camp, accelerating now up across the start and finish line, still being chased hard by Richard Hay. As up front then, it is David Mason with the gap coming down, not massively so, but slowly but surely. Lee Caroline is closing on David Mason, locking up though there is Caroline as he goes into Quarry. You can't argue with the fact that he's trying extremely hard here. Keane 3rd, Hay 4th, 5th and 6th, nose to tail. Now look at this, Darren Dowling just ahead of Tim Hood. Tim with lots of one-make experience from Honda CRXs and Ford Fiestas, and a locking Vincent Vellatini comes into camp looking for a way to get past the green car of Peter Wheeler there. He couldn't quite do it, but Vincent Vellatini trying very hard. He hasn't got as much experience of Tuscans as the TVR chairman has. He's having a good old go nonetheless. Into Bobbies comes this man, David Mason, the race leader. Now, is he going to be able to hang on up front? In 2nd place, Lee Caroline. It just looked as though there's something coming out of the bottom of Lee Caroline's car, certainly as he came out of Bobby's. Let's just see, down towards Camp Corner. Looks okay here. Accelerating now, over the start and finish line again. The top two with the gap just being chipped away at. Another couple of tenths gained there by Lee Caroline. Keane 3rd, but not really making the progress that he needs up onto the tail of those ahead of him. And then in 4th place is Richard Hay. Race leader coming through Quarry. Again, Lee Caroline locks up, drifts wide. That'll cost him time rather than gain him any. Keane 3rd, Caroline then being pursued and also pursuing. Now, what about Richard Hay? He, I reckon, is closer this time to Philip Keane. That gap is coming down again between 3rd and 4th. Lee Caroline then through Old Paddock in 2nd place at the moment, sliding the car up onto the curb, absolutely on the ragged edge. Possibly, though, is he overdriving it? He's making these little errors that's costing him time. Tower down towards Bobby's. Behind him, still Keane fending off Hay, but only just. That battle becoming ever more concerning, and that's Tim Hood going off. Tim Hood losing it, he's in the tyres. Now, how did all that start? He was battling with Darren Dowling, and the net result is that Tim Hood is in the tyre barrier. Now, was that contact, or did he come in too quickly and lose it? We'll try to find out as again, look, Lee Caroline locks up, throws the car into Quarry, sawing away at the wheel. making the run towards El Paddock. This is Darren Dowling's view. Tim Hood should be on the inside. Squeal of tyres. There he is. Wow. Out of El Paddock, on through Hammerdown, down towards Tower. Carl Hansen in the CDL Synergy car is ahead. Is he going to get out of the way and let the leaders by? The Kiwi then will see in his mirrors his teammate coming through. Yes, David Mason goes ahead of him, and now Lee Caroline has to make a pretty bold effort up on the inside to get past Carl Hansen. He's done it, he's gone through, but is he close enough to attack Mason with one more corner to go? Down towards Camp Corner they come. Ahead of them next, possibly escaping Lappery is Bob Ross, but Mason has done it. Look, he's got enough in hand. David Mason turns now through Camp Corner to win here at Castle Coombe. A tremendous drive. David Mason does it. Second over the line is Lee Caroline, and that's Phil Keane. Phil Keane with a very smoky car. Limps across the line. He's ready to bail out. He takes third place on the grass. Martin Shanker style. Out he gets. Have you seen the finish of a Tuscan race quite like that? Phil Keane out of the car before it had stopped. He sprints away. He deserves points for that alone. A very brave effort to get the car to the flag then, with it getting hotter and hotter under the bonnet. Philip Keane taking third place. Richard Hay fourth ahead of Darren Dowling, and Mark Johnston in sixth.
There was a fair bit of action towards the start, as always with the TVRs. Darren was pushing hard for the first 4 or 5 laps. I noticed he started to tail off a bit. I spoke to him afterwards. He had some brake trouble. His brakes were fading, so he obviously had to brake early instead of driving into me. That obviously slowed the field up a bit, and I got a bit of a break. Lee managed to get past, and the usual battle carried on as normal.
So Lee Caroline leads the championship by 100 points. David Mason could still mathematically be champion at Brands Hatch for the final 2 races of the year. Philip Keane third, but up to fourth is Darren Dowling now. The last 2 rounds of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge are here at Brands Hatch. The championship is going to go either to Lee Caroline or to David Mason. Caroline is champion-elect. He's only 2 points away from it, but mathematically, he still could be beaten. Mason second, Philip Keane's third, and Darren Dowling fourth, ahead of Ben Samuelson and Wayne Phelan rounding out the top 6. As ever, there are 2 races at Brands, the sprint race followed by the feature race. We're on the full Grand Prix circuit, and this one of the best tracks in the country.
It's fantastic. Sheen, which used to be Dingledale, I think. It's actually not quite as much fun because it's not quite as well, dangerous is probably the word, but challenging, I think. But it's still a fabulous circuit, and it's a real privilege to be able to race around it, to be honest.
Hayes on pole, alongside him is Philip Keane, going much better in the second half of the year.
Yeah, we struggled at the beginning of the year with gearbox problems, but we seem to have got around that now. So it's just a matter of getting my head down and trying to win the last one, really.
The sprint race about to get underway. It is 8 laps around the Grand Prix circuit. Hay and Keane on the front row. The lights go green. A slow start by Tim Hood. A slow start as normal by Lee Caroline as well. And it's going to be Philip Keane then who leads up towards paddock for the first time. We're on board though with Lee Caroline. He said at the end of qualifying he was happy to have qualified 8th. He was going to try to keep out of trouble, and the cars now make the run up towards Druids for the first time. Swinging their way around the hairpin. Phil Keane leading then in second place is Ben Samuelson ahead of Richard Hay. Fourth is Chris Stockton, and then fifth Darren Dowling and David Mason side by side. Dowling's blue car on the inside will just scrabble through. Yes, he does. Mason up a little bit wide onto the curb, and so now as they swing through Surtees for the first time, it's Phil Keane in the lead. On board now with Chris Stockton, accelerating his way up onto the Grand Prix circuit for the first time. Ahead of him there is Richard Hay. Now remember, this is only Stockton's 5th Tuscan race, and he's won already. He won at Thruxton a month or so ago. Through Hawthorns then, the short straight, Derek Minter straight on towards Westfield. Stockton having a bit of a wobble there, that drops him back, and out of Westfield comes Keane. Heading now up towards Sheen Curve. Pete Osborne goes through, being chased by Hugh Marshall. Out of Sheen Curve now, through Stirlings come the race leaders, and David Mason looking like a man in a hurry here. He's very keen to find a way past, if he can, Darren Dowling. End of lap 1 then, coming into Clark Curve. The race leader, Phil Keane, trying to break away, and there is Lee Caroline, who only has to finish to take the title. Now, is he going to drive for points, or is he going to go for yet another win? Over the line, Darren Dowling there, going around the outside of Stockton. David Mason having a look on the inside. Dowling can't get past Stockton. Mason can get past Dowling. David Mason goes ahead of him now. On board with Stockton, Richard Hay ahead. Chris Stockton diving up on the inside. Side by side round Druids, they almost lean on each other there. Stockton goes through, Richard Hay caught on the wrong foot, then pushed out wide. He loses the place to Mason and to Dowling, and now he's got Lee Caroline tucked up behind him as well. Along Cooper Straight come the race leaders all the time. Phil Keane trying here to get away from Ben Samuelson. In third place there you can see Chris Stockton. And the cars accelerate their way now up towards Hawthorn once again. Stockton tucked up behind Samuelson. He's going for second place here. He has a look up on the inside. Is he going to be able to dive through? Ben gives him racing room, but also hangs on to his place. Through Westfield. Drop downhill, then climb uphill once again. Approaching Sheen Curve, there you can see Chris Stockton firing his way through the right-hander. And the race leader, Phil Keane, still clear of Stockton again, diving up on the inside of Samuelson. And this time, Chris Stockton goes through. He's come from FF 1600 racing and from Legends, and he goes exceptionally well in a Tuscan. The ex-Andy Britnell car now second in Chris Stockton's hands. Third is Samuelson. Fourth is David Mason. And there is the recovering Tim Hood, look, latching onto the tail now of Lee Caroline. The leaders come up across the line. So up front is Keane, second is Stockton, third is Samuelson. In fourth place is David Mason, and there Richard Hay a long, long way back now. Something has happened to Richard Hay. He's fallen there behind Bob Ross, and Stockton is now attacking Phil Keane for the lead, and that's Samuelson and Mason side by side. Making their way onto the Grand Prix circuit once again. Mason pushed out wide, he trips over the curb a little bit, and he's now got Lee Caroline going after him. Under the bridge, down towards Hawthorn, swing right. Lee Caroline getting a little bit closer now to his former oval racing rival David Mason. And you can see now that Phil Keane is coming under real pressure from an inspired Chris Stockton. That's Ben Samuelson getting it wrong, runs a little bit wide, puts a wheel on the dirt, and Stockton going for the lead. Is he going to go through on the inside? Yes, he is. Chris Stockton goes through up on the inside line to take over the lead of the race. So Stockton is ahead now. Phil Keane second. Keane, remember, led up to the line at Rockingham and was just pipped at the flag by Lee Caroline. He still, therefore, has not yet had a Tuscan win. Can it be today? Across the line, Stockton versus Keane. Third, Samuelson. Fourth is Mason, and now he's got Lee Caroline right up with him, and Caroline attacking for fourth as they go into paddock. You're on board with Caroline. Accelerating now uphill. There's a gap on the inside going towards Druids. But David Mason moves across, covers the line. Ben Samuelson's gone very deep into the corner. Look, Ben Samuelson is wide into Druids. And now he's got Mason right up behind him as they drop downhill again. And Mason brakes very late, locks up, almost touches the back of Ben's car there. Stockton and Keane again side by side. Keane's gone back ahead. Phil Keane back ahead, and that's Mason on the inside of Samuelson. Is he going to be able to go through? Well, they're almost side by side as they make the run now up towards the bridge and then down towards Hawthorn. Lee Caroline possibly here, just waiting for it to end in tears ahead of him. Samuelson on the inside, Mason on the outside. Can't go right round the outside though. And now Lee Caroline looking to try to join in the fun. Mason sees a gap on the inside at Westfield. It's blocked by Ben. They touch and Samuelson hangs on to his third place with now Lee Caroline with a wheel on the curb, trying to get the run on David Mason climbing uphill, and they're all being caught by Dowling and Hood, and that's Caroline going through on the inside. Lee Caroline goes ahead now. He moves through, passes David Mason, and Ben Samuelson's third place is a rather precarious one because now he's got the champion-elect Lee Caroline bearing down on him. Keane back ahead of Stockton, and he's pulled away by 2 or 3 lengths. There you can see third is Samuelson, Caroline fourth, Mason down to fifth, sixth is Dowling, and seventh after a slow start, Tim Hood here. Over the line they come, past the pits once more, and now down towards Paddock Hill Bend, on board with Lee Caroline. Ben Samuelson, who has been perhaps the season's most improved driver, ahead of him then in third place. Up towards Druids they go, hard on the brakes and then swing right, and again Samuelson goes wide into the corner, and this means that Lee Caroline's going to go through on the inside, or does it? They run round the corner side by side, they drop down to Graham Hill Bend together and through, staying in his third place goes Ben Samuelson. Look at Mason though, Mason now tries to get past Samuelson, Caroline's going around the outside of Samuelson, approaching Surtees. Who's going to come out in front? It's Samuelson just ahead. Caroline goes one side. Mason hits Samuelson's car very hard, rides up over the left rear wheel. And look at this between the leaders. Stockton powers past Keane. Chris Stockton goes through, back into the lead of the race. Phil Keane slips to second. And third is Lee Caroline. Now, behind him, fourth all of a sudden is Darren Dowling. Fifth is Ben Samuelson. And now we're on board with Wayne Phelan, making his way up towards the new Sheen Curve. It's not David Mason he's battling with, it's the lookalike car at CDL of Hugh Marshall, and in fact Hugh has gone better here than we've seen hitherto all season. Richard Hay there you caught a glimpse of in the background, looking for a way past the TVR chairman Peter Wheeler. They come down towards Clark Curve, behind them is Jan Persson. Out of Clark, up across the line, Wheeler trying to fend off Richard Hay. They're both in TVR engineering cars, And Chris Stockton, now that he leads the race, looks like he's trying to edge away by a length or so from Phil Keane, but he's not really managing so to do at the moment. Lee Caroline clattering the curve there. Now, what he wants is for those two leaders to hold one another up. If they do that, that will give him the ideal chance to close up onto them. Meantime, number 5 there, Wayne Phelan coming under pressure. Richard Hay tucked up behind him, and Hay, normally a man that runs a little bit higher up the order than he's doing at the moment, should be able to go through on the inside. Can Wayne Phelan defend? Let's see, into Surtees. That's Hay going through on the inside. Richard Hay gains a place. Wayne Phelan slips behind him, but he sits in the draft as they now run down towards Hawthorne. Hay looking to make a move as well there on Hugh Marshall as the race leaders again climb up towards Sheen Curve. Phil Keane touching the curb. Chris Stockton runs wide though, all over the dirt he goes, and suddenly Keane's going to be back alongside him, but on the outside line, and Stockton's been very lucky to hang on to that, but now Keane's alongside as they come down towards Clearways. Is he going to be able to move across and take the lead? He is. Phil Keane leads once again. Fantastic race. People have moaned a bit this year about the size of the entry compared to how Tuscan racing was 4 or 5 years ago. Well, the racing this year has been better than ever, I think. Over the line they come. Keane versus Stockton. Side by side into paddock. Chris Stockton tries to go right round the outside. Can he do it? Yes, he can. He gets his nose in front. He powers past. What a move. Chris Stockton goes right round the outside and retakes the lead. This 8-lap sprint race giving us a fantastic duel for the leading group here between Stockton and Philip Keane, and look behind them. Lee Caroline is closing all the time. Stockton, Keane, Caroline, 1, 2, 3 as they turn through Surtees. There is Lee Caroline, hard at work. If he finishes there, if he finishes anywhere, he's going to win the championship at the end of this race. And then it's all gloves off for the main race, the feature race later in the weekend. Now Hugh Marshall still under pressure here from Wayne Phelan, who's having a look up on the inside to try and squeeze by if he can do so at Surtees, and I reckon he can. No, Hugh Marshall comes back at him. Keeps his foot in, comes round the outside. So Hugh Marshall's CDL car hangs on to its place. Wayne Phelan, for the time being, is still stuck there behind the man from London. Stockton and Keane still first and second as they make the run now up through Sheen Curve and now swing left into Stirlings. Accelerating down towards Clark Curve. Phil Keane tries one side to get past Stockton, then he tries the other. Chris Stockton is wise to all of this. Phil Keane hard at work, and he knows that he's going to have Lee Caroline with him any moment. Keane looking to try and level with Stockton now as they come up across the start and finish line, side by side past the pits. Who's going to go through into the lead? Well, Keane has a long look on the inside. Chris Stockton's just got enough grunt in a straight line, and he's better on the brakes to be able to hang on to the place then. Climbing uphill, Keane's lost a little bit of time, and now he's got Lee Caroline right up behind him. Caroline in the car, run by his own team this year. Last year it was run by Colin Blower's squad, and it goes exceptionally well now. Caroline drops downhill once again, turns left into Graham Hill Bend. Along Cooper Straight they go. Lee Caroline now chasing on behind Phil Keane. Keane doing his best, and in fact a successful best, and getting onto terms again with Stockton. And this other great little scrap going on here between Wayne Phelan and Hugh Marshall for 10th place. Hugh ahead of Wayne at the moment. Rages on. Wayne Phelan now makes his bid on the outside, but Hugh Marshall tries to defend as best he can. Sits almost in the middle of the road, but he goes a bit deep into the corner. Sorts himself out, but he won't have the momentum as they sprint out of Surtees. He will have Wayne Phelan, though, right up behind him. We're on the last lap of the race now. Chris Stockton is still leading Philip Keane. Here they come again, climbing through Dingledale towards Sheen Curve. And Chris Stockton, barring a mistake in Stirlings, I think he's going to be pretty much home and dry, because Keane isn't quite close enough to make a bid, or is he? He's got Lee Caroline shadowing him, and Philip Keane is going to have a go at the last corner of the race at Clark Curve. They come down through Clearways, they swing into Clark Curve now. Keane tries to hustle up on the inside line. Lee Caroline looking for a way past him as well. Stockton defends for the lead. It's going to be nose to tail for the victory, but look at this for the champion. Lee Caroline already celebrates as he comes across the line. Chris Stockton wins the race. Second over the line is Phil Keane, and look at this. Richard Hay and Pete Osborne for 8th place. Pete Osborne just ahead as they cross the line. Lee Caroline wins the championship though by finishing in 3rd place. Chris Stockton wins the race from Philip Keane 2nd. Lee Caroline is 3rd, Darren Dowling 4th. But let's hear from the new champion, Lee Caroline.
Yeah, I mean, it's excellent. It's not just me as a driver, it's the team, my dad, all the boys who helped me, my sponsors, obviously. It's everybody who's made it happen for me, so it's not just me as a driver, but it's brilliant. the car is everything, really. If you've got a bad car, you're not going to be winning races. So I've got a good car underneath me, so if I wasn't winning, then it'd be me at fault. So
There are lots of TVR supporters here at Brands Hatch for the last round of the TVR Tuscan Challenge. The Carlo Back Series then has a last 10-lap blast around the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch. The lights are green. Pole sitter Chris Stockton makes a good start. Lee Caroline makes a slow start, and Tim Hood gets a knock from David Mason, and there's contact, and Hood spears off into the barrier. Peter Wheeler hits the back of Pete Osborne's car, a mighty blow. Look at that! The remains of Pete Osborne's car turn through paddock. Philip Keane leads in second place, Chris Stockton, and it was Hugh Marshall also involved in it, and that's the end of Hugh Marshall's race by the look of it. His car coasting backwards off the circuit, so Keane, Stockton, Mason is the top three, and Richard Stanton diving up on the inside of Vincent Bellottini. Now, Stanton missed the sprint race yesterday. He started last on the grid. He's got a lot of work to do. Phil Keane leading, still looking, as we've said all year, for a first ever Tuscan win. And Tim Hood, facing the wrong way, is going no further. Philip Keane leading David Mason. Chris Stockton is third, and this is the new TVR Tuscan champion. It's Lee Caroline then, who's had 15 wins this year. Steve Guglielmi had 14 when he won the championship a year or two back. Well, Lee Caroline would dearly like to make it 16 victories. He might be able to win this race, but he's got a bit of work to do now as he dives past Ben Samuelson going into Sheen Curve. Phil Keane leads a rather sideways David Mason. Diving up on the inside there is Ben Samuelson to unsettle Lee Caroline, but it won't work for him. Out of Stirling's, down towards Clearways they come though for the first time in this 10-lap race. Out of Clearways, through Clark Curve, number 7 there, Darren Dowling, trying to find a way now past Ben Samuelson, and it is Phil Keane in the lead as they come up over the start and finish line, in towards paddock again, with Mason second, Stockton third, and Caroline fourth, past the incident zone through the debris. Ben Samuelson locked up, and here's a replay. Now let's see, Tim Hood's a little bit slow away. Watch the yellow car of David Mason, because he goes for a good start, sees Lee Caroline ahead, just goes through a gap, and that tiny bit of contact unsettles the car of Tim Hood. Peter Wheeler hits the back of Pete Osborne, who braked to avoid the spinning Hood, and Osborne and Hood are the real casualties. Hugh Marshall involved as well, he's going no further. The leading group of cars then, 4 of them, run as one virtually across the line. Keane, Mason, Stockton, and then fourth, Lee Caroline. Chris Stockton diving up on the inside for second, an extraordinary move. Through he goes on the inside, leaves his braking ludicrously late, runs wide, and David Mason comes back at him on the inside line once again. Mason through, is he? Yes, he is, into second place and having a nibble at Phil Keane's car as well. There's a CDL flag waving on the exit of Druids, and it's the CDL that David Mason drives. He comes now through Graham Hill Bend, right up behind Phil Keane. Chris Stockton tucked up behind them in third place. Lee Caroline looking for a way by as well. Then in fifth place is Ben Samuelson, and they swing left now onto the Grand Prix circuit once again. Out of Surtees, Mason determined to find a way past Keane. Lee Caroline looking for a way up on the inside of Stockton as well as they dive down towards Hawthorns. Caroline is alongside and he goes through there. Number 38, the blue and white car of this year's champion. Lee Caroline through into third place. David Mason going for the lead as well as they come into Westfield. On board with Caroline, Mason ahead, Mason now to the left, and Lee Caroline should be able to go through into second place as they come now into Sheen Curve, and he does go through. Lee Caroline up into second place. You're on board with Chris Stockton though, now looking for a way pass on the inside, and he locks up and he gets all sideways and Stockton loses it. Chris Stockton spins. Now he tries to sort himself out, but he's going to be losing more and more places. He went for a gap on the inside of Mason, the gap closed, he stood on the brakes to avoid making contact, and the back overtook the front. Jan Persson goes past him, Vincent Bellottini goes past him, and Lee Caroline goes past Phil Keane for the lead now. Lee Caroline, the new champion, is the new race leader to boot. Down the hill he comes. Phil Keane, though, can see yet again how close he's come to winning a Tuscan race. Now, can he offer anything in retaliation here? Into Surtees they come. It's Lee Caroline leading Philip Keane. In third place, David Mason, and as they turn left onto the Grand Prix circuit, this is a replay of what happened to Chris Stockton a lap ago. Up the inside to get past Mason, stands on the brakes when he realises that there was possibly some contact inevitable. The car swapped ends on him. Lots of places lost, and Chris Stockton then rejoins now. The BTC racing car has been driven extremely well in only the handful of races that Stockton's done. That, I think, is about the only mistake we've seen from him this year. Good little scrap going on here. Look, Darren Dowling coming under a lot of pressure from Richard Hay. Hay trying to recover from yesterday's race where the car cut out on him a little bit. And the hand signal from Richard Hay there suggests that he's not very impressed about being behind Darren Dowling, but he hasn't yet found a way past. And Dowling is at liberty to defend, of course. It's a battle for position, this. Darren Dowling fending off Richard Hay. You're looking from Wayne Phelan's car at Richard Stanton's yellow and black Tuscan ahead, started last on the grid, and as ever, Stanton has put in one of his amazing charges up through the field. On board now with Wayne Phelan coming down towards the right-hander at Clark Curve. Number 7, Darren Dowling going through Richard Hay, trying to tighten his line, and now Richard gets the run on him as they come up across the line, so this should be Hay's chance to go through. It's Caroline and Keane first and second, Mason third. Now look behind them, that's Hay going up on the inside of Darren Dowling, and at last he's done it. Richard Hay goes through, Richard Hay runs wide. Darren Dowling has a look to try and come back at him on the inside line up now towards Druids. Richard Hay closes the door, covers the line, and Dowling gives him a little bit of a nudge then. They're both being caught by Richard Stanton as well. Downhill comes Richard Hay into Graham Hill Bend. Darren Dowling behind him, losing touch just a little bit though now, and that's a rather slow Chris Stockton who is pulling off. Yes, that's the end of the race for Chris Stockton then. Whatever the problem is, looked mechanical. Sad to say, Chris Stockton's season comes to an early halt. Darren Dowling has slowed. Look, Richard Stanton's gone around the outside of him, and now Dowling is about to lose a place to his Insane Racing teammate Wayne Phelan, who says thanks Darren for getting out of my way. Through Westfield, Stanton versus Phelan. Wayne not really close enough here to have a go, but he's still not losing touch with Richard Stanton. Stanton, for my money, looks like he's closing on Richard Hay and possibly taking Phelan with him. Down through the gears into Stirling's, turn left and accelerate now back down towards the right-hander at Clark Curve. Turning their way now into the right-hander, there's a car ahead, it's Richard Hay, and Hay has slowed. I think, is he heading for the pit lane? He is. Richard Hay coming in as well. So Dowling and Hay, who ran together at the start of the lap, both pit, or at least both have problems. Hay's in the pit, Dowling has slowed. Darren Dowling, let's see, carries on in fact. He's dropped a long way back behind Wayne Phelan, but Darren Dowling continues as Richard Hay comes into the pit lane. And once again, it looks as though a mechanical malady has got in the way of a good result for Hay. But second and third are together. Lee Caroline has gone now, way clear in the distance, but Phil Keane having to defend very vigorously indeed from David Mason. Mason has driven his heart out this year with practically no budget at all. He's deserved far more wins than he's taken, but he has never once stopped trying. Here he comes now, up towards the line. Keane ahead of him, Mason right up behind him. Past the pits, the fight for second goes into paddock. Philip Keane only just ahead of David Mason, who gives the curb a little bit of a clip. Phil Keane runs wide, powering now up towards Druids. And again, David Mason there looks for a way pass on the outside there of number 41. That's the car of Philip Keane, and as they drop downhill now, Keane hangs on to his second place. Mason, former Superstocks racer, former MGF racer, and a very quick Tuscan racer, looks for a way by. But Philip Keane, in the world's widest TVR, positions it just right and makes absolutely 100% sure that David Mason can't find a way by. Lee Caroline on his own, win number 16 of the year beckons. It's been an extraordinary season this for Lee Caroline. He's made bad starts, he's worked hard for those race wins, and he's going to be a very deserving champion. But look at this for second in the race. David Mason on the inside of Phil Keane, goes through at Westfield, does he? Yes, I think on the inside, yes, he's gone through. David Mason up into second place, Philip Keane behind him. Keane still denied then the chance to win a TVR race this year. He's come ever so close, and on this, the last lap, he finds himself not second, but now third behind Caroline and Mason. The leaders come down through Clark Curve, up to the checkered flag. Lee Caroline, he's going to make it 16 wins. He's going to make it the championship. He's going to round out the season in style. Lee Caroline racks up another win in the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge and underlines in Reading that 2003 has been about Lee Caroline and the Caroline Racing Tuscan. Richard Stanton here comes across the line in 5th place. Wayne Phelan 6th. Good drive by both of them. But look at this traffic jam coming into Clark Curve. It's for 7th. Rod Barrett goes a little bit wide. Vincent Vellottini almost alongside him as they sprint to the line. Rod Barrett is only just ahead, and Vellottini in danger of losing a place to Darren Dowling as they come over the line. Barrett 7th, Vellottini 8th, 9th Darren Dowling, and Andy Holden rounding out the top 10. He's done it again though. Lee Caroline the race winner, and in style.
No, I always get a bad start, but it makes a good race of things. I think that's like win 16 or 17 now, so we couldn't end the season in any other way being champion, and we just got to show we had the pace, and that is why we are champion.
Lee Caroline is the champion, and David Mason is the runner-up. Without a win, Philip Keane third ahead of Darren Dowling and Ben Samuelson, with Wayne Phelan rounding out the top 6.